Hello and welcome to Washington DC. I'm Gautam Roy. People say that this is the best time to be in this part of the world. It's fall and the leaves have started to change color. But as seasons change, so does the world. New challenges keep on arising, be it on the front of terrorism or on the front of health with the COVID, not to speak of climate change. But it's to these changes that responsible countries respond with action. And that's what leaders of the Quad are expected to do when they meet at the White House on the 24th of September in person for the first time. The Quad has taken a lot of major incremental steps bit by bit, and there could be more in store as well. Flag bearer of freedom, democracy, peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, the Quad is all set for its first in-person leadership summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be meeting with his three Quad counterparts, US President Joe Biden, Japanese Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison in the White House on Friday, the 24th of September. It's Prime Minister Modi's second foreign visit since the coronavirus pandemic spread across the world last year. The first was to Bangladesh for three epical events, including its Golden Jubilee, but this is the first transcontinental visit.
Prime Minister's visit to the US. As mentioned therein, he will participate in the first in-person Quad Leaders Summit in Washington on September 24th. On September 25th, he will address the UN General Debate of the UN General Assembly at its 76th session. While Prime Minister is in Washington, he will also have a bilateral meeting with President Biden. We also look forward to bilateral meetings with other Quad leaders.
This may be the first in-person Quad summit, but the four leaders had met virtually just over 6 months ago in the first virtual leaders summit. The ramped up frequency making it evident that the platform is being revved up on the engagement and action front. The pandemic, its impact and the changing geopolitical situation from Afghanistan in the west to North Korea in the east, apart from the moves made by China throughout the Indo-Pacific and beyond, has widened the Quad's agenda and action points. Indicated as much by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar when he briefed the media after the recent 2+2 talks with Australia in New Delhi.
As members of the Quad, we recognize the importance of plurilateralism in a multipolar and rebalanced world. We appreciate the value of our trilaterals with Japan, France and Indonesia and will hold these dialogues soon. The importance of ongoing cooperation in multilateral arena for preserving the rules-based. Our cooperation in the Commonwealth is important to that organization's performance.
There are clear indications on the areas the Quad would like to move its cooperation and coordination forward. According to a White House statement, on the in-person summit, the leaders will focus on advancing practical cooperation in areas like combating COVID-19, addressing the climate crisis, partnering on emerging technologies and cyberspace, and promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific. These agenda themes clearly show that the Quad is rapidly moving beyond a grouping of nations only focused on security-related issues in the Indo-Pacific. But all agenda items do stem from the common goal of promoting freedom, democracy, peace and prosperity for all. The in-person Quad Summit has its genesis, or shall we say precursor, in what happened almost 6 months ago. That was the first virtual meeting of the four Quad leaders. And that resulted in three key working groups being formed, one on vaccines, another one on climate change, and the third one on critical technologies. It also produced a joint statement, the spirit of the Quad. The 12th of March 2021 stands out as a landmark day for the Quad. All the four top leaders of India, the United States, Japan and Australia came together for the first time virtually because of the COVID pandemic. Tackling the virus was one of the top items on the agenda, with cooperation on vaccines for the entire world at the forefront, apart from climate change and critical and emerging technologies.
We are united by our democratic values and our commitment to a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Our agenda today, covering areas like vaccines, climate change and emerging technologies, make the Quad a force for global good.
The meeting resulted in concrete takeaways indicating a clear path for the Quad for the coming months and years. These were spelled out in the Quad leaders' joint statement called the Spirit of the Quad. The creation of a vaccine expert working group was announced. The group has been established to implement the Quad nations' commitment to safe and effective vaccine distribution. The launch of a Critical and Emerging Technology Working Group was also announced. The Critical and Emerging Technology Working Group is to facilitate cooperation on international standards and innovative technologies of the future. Establishment of a Climate Working Group was also announced. The Climate Working Group would strengthen climate action globally on mitigation, adaptation, resilience, technology, capacity building and climate finance. It was also said that Quad foreign ministers will converse often and meet at least once a year.
We're launching an ambitious new joint partnership that is going to boost vaccine manufacturing and for the global benefit and strengthen vaccinations to benefit the entire Indo-Pacific. The Quad is going to be a vital arena for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific.
The White House also released a fact sheet of the virtual summit which further spelled out the next steps for the Quad partners. It said that the US through its Development Finance Corporation will work with India's company Biological E to finance increased capacity. It will support Biological E's efforts to produce at least 1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines by the end of 2022. This will include the Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine. Japan through Japan International Cooperation Agency, that's JICA, is in discussions with India to provide concessional yen loans. These loans will be for expanding making of COVID-19 vaccines for export. The export will be for global benefit through key multilateral initiatives like COVAX. Australia will contribute $77 million for vaccines and last-mile delivery support with a focus on Southeast Asia. This amount is in addition to Australia's existing commitment of $407 million for vaccines to 9 Pacific islands and Timor-Leste. Japan will help in the purchase of vaccines and cold chain support in developing countries. Japan will also provision a grant aid of $41 million and new concessional yen loans in alignment with COVAX. The US will draw on at least $100 million in regional efforts focused on immunization. Strengthening implementation of the Paris Agreement was the key focus spelled out for the Climate Working Group. Clear action points were also spelled out for the Critical and Emerging Technology Working Group. Clearly, the Quad leaders put the wheels in motion in March this year for taking their engagement and cooperation to the next level. The 24th of September in-person summit is then likely to take the security, combating COVID, climate change and tech initiatives forward, apart from expanding the areas the partnership covers. The origin of the Quad lies in the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami which hit Japan very hard. The four nations came together to respond to this disaster, and thereafter the Quad has passed through an evolution of milestone after milestone to come to this stage where the Quad has come of age. The Quad has come of age now. Its leaders are meeting face to face at the White House in Washington, D.C. Had it not been for the COVID pandemic, the in-person meeting would have happened much earlier. But the pandemic has also taken the cooperation and coordination between the four nations to another level, apart from security and maritime challenges in the Indo-Pacific region.
Days of unilateralism are over. Bilateralism has its own limits, and as the COVID reminded us, multilateralism is simply not working well enough. The resistance to reforming international organizations compel us to look for more practical and immediate solutions. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the case for the Quad.
The partners came together when India, Japan, Australia and the US collaborated on disaster relief efforts after the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami which hit Japan hard. The inaugural Quad working level meeting at the level of officials took place in May 2007 on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum at the initiation of the then Japan PM, Abe Shinzo. Abe addressed the Indian Parliament in August 2007, introducing the idea of a broader Asia partnership involving the four nations. The same year in September, the annual India-US Malabar Naval Exercise in the Bay of Bengal was extended to include Japan, Australia and Singapore. But next year in February, Australia pulled back due to the pressure being mounted on it by China, its largest trading partner. The Quad was mooted again by the then Japanese PM Abe Shinzo when he advocated the creation of a democracy security diamond with Australia, India and the US. The rising threat of China, its building of islands in the South China Sea and militarizing the region with an airstrip revived the Quad, with the four partners broadening its objectives and creating a mechanism to slowly establish a rules-based international order. The second Quad meeting at the level of officials took place in June 2018 in Singapore, more than a decade after the first. This was quickly followed up in a matter of months by the third Quad meeting at the level of officials, again in Singapore. The fourth Quad meeting at the level of officials took place in May 2019 in Bangkok. And again, a few months later, the first Quad Foreign Ministers meeting took place in New York in September. Another key milestone came in March 2020 with the Quad Plus meeting taking place, where South Korea, Vietnam and New Zealand were included to discuss COVID-19 response. The 2020 Quad Ministerial in October became the first standalone meeting, as the previous ministerials and other meetings had taken place on the sidelines of other summits. And this led to the first virtual Quad leaders meeting, which took the Quad partnership to the topmost level. Now towards the end of September in 2021, the first in-person Quad summit is set to take place at the White House. The Quad has come a long way. A better future beckons. Every time the Quad takes any step, be it meeting of officials or of leaders, China always reacts in anger. It somehow seems to be suffering from a persecution complex that the Quad has come about to contain its rise. But India and other Quad leaders have always maintained that the Quad is something completely different. It is way beyond seeking to contain anyone. It has so many other action points that are for the common good of the world. And it is all about being open, inclusive, and of course, all about freedom. Time and time again, the four Quad nations have said that the grouping is about principles such as openness, inclusiveness, democracy, rule-based order and freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific, which is unconstrained by coercion. But China has always interpreted the Quad as a move by India, the US, Japan and Australia to contain its rise.
The kind of issues Quad is focused on today, vaccines, supply chains, education, connectivity. I can't see any relationship between such issues and NATO or any other kind of organizations like that. So I think it's important not to misrepresent what is the reality out there.
However, China's increasing belligerence in the region has been an issue of concern for several Asian countries, apart from impeding investigations into the origins of COVID pandemic, which spread across the world from Wuhan last year. China has not been following international rules and principles. It's not been respecting freedom of navigation of other nations. It's militarized the Indo-Pacific region. It's built airstrips on reclaimed islands in the South China Sea. It's entered into territorial disputes with Japan, Taiwan and the Philippines. It's curbed Hong Kong's autonomy with the national security law. It also triggered a border conflict with India in eastern Ladakh. China could do well to re-examine its own conduct. The Quad has never mentioned China in any of its statements or documents, but it has always advocated for principles which, if practiced, would ensure the welfare of all. Come 24th of September, the eyes of the world will be trained on the White House, because this is where the leaders of the Quad will be meeting for the first time in person, because that is what is on the agenda on that particular date. The Quad has already taken major steps forward as far as cooperation amongst the four members are concerned. We have PTI's chief US correspondent Lalit Kejha with us. Just tell us, how is the US media viewing this Quad summit, the first in-person Quad summit, coming at a time when things have suddenly changed in Afghanistan, and before that also the Quad itself in a way almost redefined itself. It widened its agenda as well and is addressing so many issues that are relevant to the world now.
Yeah, it's seen as a very important and significant meeting of top four world leaders, or representing the democratic countries in that part of the world. In particular, after the withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan, this is seen as most important and significant event from the US diplomatic perspective.
And the Quad is working on getting more vaccines out in the world. It is addressing climate change as well. There are working groups for that, and critical technologies is also another area where the Quad wants to make significant progress in very little time. Do you feel that this is something that will be further taken forward, or you feel that more dimensions could be added to it as well?
I'm sure the way they are moving forward, new dimensions and new aspects would be added. New working group might be added to this summit when the four leaders meet. The purpose is, but the goal remains unchanged, which is the peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region, where these four countries can collaborate with each other, for not only for their own people but also for the entire region as well.
And China always reacts with anger whenever there is something related to Quad that takes place, especially if statements are made and decisions are taken. It feels that it is being contained. But the Quad leaders have always maintained that that is not the case. The Quad is something entirely different. It's for the good of all. Now, this is something that perhaps again will be mirrored in the actions that are taken at the White House.
Definitely, if you look at the statements of these four countries ever since the Quad started, they have never mentioned China even once. They have always said they want peace and prosperity in the region. China has not been part of that. But there have been certain activities and actions from one particular country in that region which creates, which leads to this apprehension that the peace the Indo-Pacific has seen in the last several decades might be disturbed, and those actions needs to be taken care of.
Even at the UN, the theme this time around is resilience, with the focus on making it sustainable as well. Do you think that is also something that the Quad will reflect, especially when it comes to addressing the issue of climate change?
Definitely, climate change is an important issue, and all the four leaders would be talking about it in great detail, how these four countries can work together and convince other nations as well to move forward on this climate change issue, which both Prime Minister Modi and President Biden believe and are convinced that this is the greatest threat to humanity.
And the situation in Afghanistan, that has completely changed since the first virtual summit had taken place in March. So that, do you think that will figure in as well? Because that is a huge concern, the Taliban coming to power over there. Terrorism is, of course, one of the key areas that the Quad has already tried to address in its previous meetings as well. So this is something that you think that will be taken up as well?
Definitely, at least in the bilateral and Quad also, I think that these leaders and the Prime Minister Modi and President Biden would be talking about the developments in Afghanistan. None of these leaders want that Afghanistan should go back to what it was before 2001, that it shouldn't be a hub of terrorist activities, and its ground shouldn't be used for any terrorist activities, either in India, USA, any part of the world.
Where agricultural products are concerned, there perhaps you think is an area that really requires work. We have tried to persist with the US, but right now things have got stuck a bit.
Look, both are democratic countries, and these are elected by the people. They have to serve the interests of their own people. And if we see how the trade differences between the two countries has been, there has been some common factor for the last 2 decades itself. Agriculture is one of them. Intellectual property is another one of them. But there has been a lot of convergence as well. Despite those sharp differences, the two bilateral trade between the two countries have moved forward at a fast pace. Even President Biden has set his goal. He wants the bilateral trade between the two countries should go to around $500 billion per annum. Right now it's around $150 billion per annum.
Sounds great. Well, it's a two-way street when it comes to any relationship, and that's what India and US are also about. And Quad, for that matter, it is 4 nations there acting in concert for common good goals for the world. Only China has a problem with it, and China, if it has a problem with it, then it should perhaps look within to answers that can really tell it why is it perceiving the Quad to be containing it. We saw in the last meeting that has taken place virtually that Quad had come up with 3 working groups. One, of course, on vaccines, where India is playing a major part, where providing vaccines to the world is concerned. Then, of course, there's climate change. We'll see how that is taken forward in terms of addressing the entire Paris Agreement goals that are still being worked upon. India is a huge contributor on that front as well. Already, the only G20 country that is meeting all its commitments that are declared in terms of keeping temperatures down to 2 degrees Celsius or lesser. And of course, there's new and emerging technologies. It's also called critical technologies. There's another working group on that. What more can be done on those fronts? How can Quad further widen its ambit? What else it can talk about? Because there are, of course, many areas that the Quad is concerned with. First of all, of course, there's peace and security in the Indo-Pacific.
I wanted to convey the Biden-Harris administration's message of our strong commitment to our allies and partners. India, in particular, is an increasingly important partner among today's rapidly shifting international dynamics. And I reaffirmed our commitment to a comprehensive and forward-looking defense partnership with India as a central pillar of our approach to the region.
There is connectivity, infrastructure, there's education, and there's an overhanging concern about what has happened in Afghanistan as well. That's a fresh development. The Quad leaders are likely to deliberate about that as well. And above all, it's the interest of everyone. The vision that India had given, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had given of Sagar, that is security and growth for all in the region, is something that will be central. Keeping ASEAN at the center of Quad is also something that has been always talked about at the level of the leaders, and that is what we will see perhaps progress being made on even further. Even in bilateral talks, all these issues will figure, because these nations have been working on so many facets of their relationships for all these years, and it's building a matrix of cooperation and coordination that perhaps will benefit for the entire world.